cloud. All right, so this is where we left off. So if you followed along, you can just pick up on the file that you had. If you didn't, then go to the blog, and download where we left off, and then you'll have exactly the same starting point that I have. And so you'll remember that what our goal to accomplish is to be able to come up with a route that will let us visit all of these different hotel properties in an order that's going to be somewhat reasonable. We don't want to start in Salt Lake and then go to Oregon and then go to Phoenix and then go to Los Angeles, and then go to Las Vegas. We want to go in a reasonable route. We're employing, this is a kind of an age-old problem known as a traveling salesman problem, and we will be implementing an age-old heuristic called the next nearest city heuristic. What's a heuristic? What's the normal word for heuristic? I've said it so often now, it seems like a normal word to me. What's the normal word for a heuristic? It's a rule of thumb, yeah. So you want to sound smart when you say rule of thumb, say heuristic instead. All right. So, and of course, along the way, we are getting comfortable with using an array. Remember that an array in English just means an ordered, do you remember what it was? What your definition was? An organized or an ordered series or arrangement of something. So arrays are always of something. And so when we say an array in VBA, we're talking about an array of what? Say it with me. An array of variables. Yeah, it's an array of variables. So remember, a variable is just a location in memory that we kind of give a name. And with an array, we make dozens or hundreds or thousands of variables all at the same time. They all have the same name, but an index number that just differentiates them. So we created a hotel array, and we read all the information off of our distance array. We read all this information in and loaded that array up. So if you'll remember looking at this code, we first, up here, we declared these arrays. Because we're not saying how big to make them when we declare them, they are dynamic arrays. Before we can use this hotel array, we have to redim it and give it a size. So if you put a number up here when you're making this, then that's the size it's going to be. You cannot change that at runtime. But if you start without a value there, then you can say, oh, I want to figure out what hotel count is. We're going to go find out how many hotels we have, and then we'll redim that to a particular size, and then that gets it set up and ready for us to go. We've got X here as an integer that we're going to use to control this loop. Ubound is a function where I can ask an array, what's its upper boundary? And so I can ask for the upper boundary of hotel. That's going to give me 35. And so this loop will go 36 times, 0 through 35, and then we'll use that 0. Oh, I think I put the times 1 in here just to show that you can actually do calculations on this. That's kind of pointless. I mean, that was plus 0 times 1, right? That's not changing the value of X. So hotel sub X then is going to equal. So we're saying as we go through this the first time, we're looking at the number 0 array, a variable in the array, and we're going to go look at row 2, column 1, pull the value out and put it into hotel number 0. Next time through the loop, X will be 1. Hotel number 1 is going to be from row 3. Hotel number 2 will be from row number 4, and so forth. We are also we created another array called route, and it's going to be the array that is just to keep track of the different cities that we're going to. We're initializing route with -1 in all the values here, in all the slots in the array, because we're going to be looking at that route to ask, is this a city that we've been to already? And since city number 0 is a real city, we don't want that to accidentally be in there. So we're setting it down to be some number that we know can't be a valid array index. So when we ask, have we been to city number 0, it will tell us no. Okay, then right at the end of class, we made this nested loop, and this is partway into filling up our distance array. Okay, so let's take a look at the issue with the distance array. Here's our data, distance. It is common to see these kinds of tables either with information only on a half of the grid, or the other thing that's common is to have like 1 unit above and 1 below. So above the grid would be miles between the cities, and then kilometers between the cities would be below. And so the thing is that when we're trying to find out, like we're going to be here at some point, we're going to be here in Las Vegas, and we want to find out, hey, what's the nearest property to Las Vegas? Now, the truth is we only need half, or even a little bit less than half, of the variables that we're creating here for this array, but arrays are not triangular. Arrays are always going to be rectangular. A two-dimensional array, you can think of it as being rectangular. And so I'm going to have all of these variables declared anyway, so I might as well fill these up with what numbers? What numbers belong right in here? It's all of these numbers right here. I want to take these, I want to put them right here. So even though on this table out here, it's not going to have these numbers in it, when I make the array, I'd like the array to hold everything, so that when I'm over here looking at Las Vegas, the only row in my distance array that I have to even think about is the one from Las Vegas, because that row that has Las Vegas as the identifier, or the hotel number 7 as the identifier, is going to have the distances between it and every other property. Do I care about this number at all when I'm in Las Vegas, right? So here I am in Las Vegas. Is this number right here, this 404, is it meaningful to me at all when I'm thinking, where should I go from Las Vegas? No, because that's the distance between whatever hotel 8 is and whatever hotel 5 is. And I don't care about that one. So that's where we are. If I look at the inner loop here, X is going from 0 to my upper boundary. And so I will be putting into, well, probably makes sense to kind of think of this kind of as a set. So let's talk through this loop here. So we come into this loop, and Y is going to initially get set to 0. And then we start this one, X is going to be 0. And so we're looking at the 0, 0 spot in the array. If I think of that here, I'll be kind of looking at writing to this spot right here. And that's going to, I'm going to pull the value from my distance sheet, looking at row 2, 0 plus 2, and column 2, 0 plus 2. Let's just take a look at that sheet. And so that's the value that I'm going after. Y then is going to stay 0 while this loop iterates. I get to the end of this loop, X is going to go up to 1. We'll run this again. Here, Y is still 0, X is 1. And we'll make a corresponding adjustment on the sheet. And so we'll be reading in the 0, 1 position and reading it from row 2, column 3. X will go up, and we'll kind of continue to move right across that row and pull in all those values. Then once I've gotten all the way across that row, we come here, and Y goes up, back up to the top of this loop. Y is now 1, X goes back to 0. And now we're going through 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, and filling all of that up. Now, as it turns out, if we look right here, we don't really need to look at 0, 0 or 1, 1 or 2, 2 or 3, 3, because that's the distance between a hotel and itself. That's always going to be 0. Well, the good news is that because this is a numeric array, my distance are single precision floating point numbers, it's going to start off with zeros anyway. So I really don't need to look here. And in fact, every time I move down to a different row, there's one less column for me to read. So when when Y is 0, what's the first relevant, let's look at it over here in the array. When Y is 0, what is the first relevant position in my, for my value of X that I care about? So when Y is 0, the first value for the first column we need to look at is 1. When Y is 1, the first column I have to look at, is 2. When Y is 2, the first column you need to look at is 3. What's the relationship? Yeah, so X doesn't need to go back to 0 every time. X should look where? Where should X start? At Y plus 1. And so now when we come through here, we're going to start off, Y is going to be 0. X is going to be 1 the first time through. So now we'll be writing to Y to 0, 1, and it will be reading from row 2, column 3. So now we should only be reading across this data. We're only reading the cells that actually have data in it at this point. Okay. The nested loops are tricky to understand, and multidimensional arrays are also tricky. So we've got kind of 2 tricky ideas here. Show me how comfortable you are with what we've done so far. 0 to 5, where are you on this? 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so that's about where we are. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and then we're going to see if we've got all the values that we expect to have. So as long as I look at something where X is larger than Y, where my second index is larger than my first index, I should get a number. So I'm going to look at my dist array, and I'm going to look at 0, 1. That should be my first number in there. Is that really what 691 is? Yeah, 691. And as I move across, so increment that by 1, I should get 374. That looks pretty good. If I then bring this up by 1, that should be this number right here, 653. Okay, so we're doing pretty good. If I put these in the opposite order, so 2, 1, then what do I expect to see? What should I see here? So the analogous spot in my array here, this is row 2, column 1. It's like 0, 1, 2, column 1. It's like that cell right there. What should I expect to see in my array from there? Like when I print this, what's it going to be? Yeah, it should be 0, because remember, this whole array starts out with zeros in it. All of these variables are numbers, and so they get initialized to 0. So I got to figure out how to get the same number in 2, 1 as I have in 1, 2. So I got to get 653. Right? I got to get that number right here. How am I going to do it? Any thoughts? It took me a while to think of this the first time, but let's think about let's just think about it in terms of the indices. When I write to 1, 2, I also want to write to 2, 1. When I write to 0, 3, I want to write to 3, 0. One, 2, 3, 0. I just switch the indices. It's just by switching those indices, am I going to fill in the opposite side of this? And so I'm going to say dist sub X, Y is equal to what? I could read it off the worksheet again, but what else? Where else is that value by the time this line executes? Yeah, I just read this value into my array at this position. So just by, I would be happy with either of these two approaches. These two lines are going to do the same thing, right? Because of course, this one just takes that value off the sheet, puts it in the array. Here, I'm taking that value off the sheet, putting it into a different place in the array. But here, I'm putting it into a different place of the array, but looking into the place that I just barely wrote it into. Which one's faster? It doesn't matter, right? Because how much faster is it going to be? Maybe on this, a couple of nanoseconds. It really is going to be an imperceptible difference in time. I don't know. I'm going to do this one. Okay, so now let me stop and rerun. So now I should be able to look at 1, 2, or 2, 1 and get the same number out. Look at 16, 22, or 22, 16. So now I've successfully built out this array to be as it shows here. So I've got my numbers fully specified. Okay, any questions? This nested loop where we're starting these kind of not at the same place, this is a kind of a complex structure. So if you're feeling like, that's a little, I'm kind of struggling with that, that's okay. At this point, you can say, all right, we're going to believe that that's doing the trick, and we're going to kind of move on now and use it to solve the problem. Okay, so I think we've got our arrays initialized. So I'm going to go ahead and delete my stop statement. And so I can call this subprocedure to initialize my arrays, which I'm going to do here when I say calc route. So step 1, when I'm calculating my route, just initialize my arrays, and then let's get down to business and calculate the route. Now, remember that the way that we're going to establish this route is by putting in the numbers that correspond to various hotels right over here. So how am I going to say start in Salt Lake? What do I have to do to this route array to say start in Salt Lake? First of all, route array only holds numbers. It holds integers. And so I've got to somehow say Salt Lake with an integer. How do I say Salt Lake City with an integer in this structure? Yeah, the Sheraton in Salt Lake is hotel number 1. So the way that I'm going to say start in Salt Lake is by putting the number that corresponds for Salt Lake in the 0 position of this array. And so I'm going to say route sub 0 equals 1. Seems like a weird way to say start in Salt Lake, but that's what that says in this context. Okay, now, how do I find out where's the next place to go? Well, now that I know we're in hotel number 1, I just need to look across this set of numbers and find what the smallest one is. The smallest one that I haven't been to. At this point, which hotel have I been to? Yeah, hotel number 1. So what's the distance that corresponds to hotel number 1 in this array? Or in this row of the array? It's right there. Good news, because that's going to be the smallest number. That's 0. That is going to be the shortest distance. So we could say, we want to see the ones, we want to, consider the ones that are not the same as the place that I am and ones that I haven't been to. But if I already say I've been to it, by the time I got here, then that handles it, right? I don't have to consider itself as a special case. It's just not allowed to go to the ones that we've been to. All right, so I think it would probably be helpful if we made another function that's just called been there, that we can give it a hotel number and it could tell us if we've been there or not. So I'll make another subprocedure right here. Actually, this is going to be a function. Difference between a subprocedure and a function procedure? Function procedure returns a value. Been there. I'm going to pass it a hotel number. And let's have it return true or false. So been there true means you've been there false means you haven't been there. So as Boolean. All right. So what does been there have to do to be able to let me know if I've been there or not? I'm setting it down hotel number 1. What has been there going to do to be able to answer the question if I've already been to hotel number 1? It's kind of a simple algorithm that we have to do here. What is it? Yep. Yeah, we're going to be passing in a hotel number 1, and all we have to do is check our route array, which at this point has a 1 in it here. We're just going to run through this until one of two things happens. We find the number, and then we know, yeah, we've been there is true, or until we've gone through them all and we didn't find the number. Okay. So I'm going to use a little for loop to go through that array. I'll need a control variable. Dim x as an integer. By the way, I've got an x as an integer here and x as an integer here. Should I be worried about that? Are these two going to step on their toes? And the answer is no, because they're declared inside the subprocedure. This x is only available inside this subprocedure and is a different location in memory than this one is. So we got two variables named x, that's okay. They're in different subprocedures. So when I refer to x in one subprocedure, it's one variable. When I refer to x in the other subprocedure, it's a different variable. Now, if I had declared that x out here, I got to be a little more careful because now that would be one variable that they're both referring to, and they could potentially step on each other's toes. But because they're both declared inside, then we're just safe. All right, well, let's just loop across that array. For x equals 0 to the upper boundary of route, my route array. I'm just going to check if route sub x, so when x is 0, I'll be looking at this number right here. And I just want to say if route sub x, 1, is equal to the hotel number that got passed in, then what do we do? What does it mean if I find a match between route sub x and the hotel number passed in? Yeah, that means, yeah, we found the number you were looking for. This is a hotel you've been to. And so we're just going to now set the name of this function equal to true. Tell me, is there any reason to keep looking? What am I going to do if I find it in there again? Am I going to send back extra true? Double true? It was there twice. It's double true. It's true times 2. No, there's no, once I found it, there's no reason to keep looking. So I can either exit for, done with a loop. What's happening after the loop? Nothing. At the end of the function. Or I can exit function. Take your pick. Either one's fine. Set it to true and get out of here. If it never hits this line, so it goes through the whole array and never finds it, then it's going to return what? Whatever the default value for a Boolean type is, which is false. Some people really would prefer to see it this way, to see it explicit in the code. You know, if I get all the way through the loop and I didn't exit out, then bin there equals false. I could take it or leave it. Data types have a default type if you never set it to true, but this way you see it and you say, okay, there it is, equaling false. It's got to be that. Okay. Well, great. So now, oh, yeah, actually that was a little premature. We are going to need to know that, but here's what I want to do here. I want to set route sub 1 is going to be equal to my next hotel. We've got another function to write, next hotel. And I think I will go ahead and pass it here. We could say the next hotel after 1, or we could just say next hotel and expect our code to figure out what the next hotel would be. How can it figure out what the next hotel, what the current hotel is? Yeah, I mean, one way to do it would be to start with, maybe, I don't think I've ever taught it this way before. Why don't we go ahead and do that this time? So instead of telling it where we are, we're going to have next hotel figure out where we currently are. And so I think we're going to just start at the bottom and keep coming up until we find one that's not -1. So let's go ahead and have that be kind of the first step in our next hotel. So make another function here called the next hotel. It's not taking anything. So let's go ahead and find our current hotel. And we're thinking of these hotels as numbers now. So it'll just be an integer. Is integer what we're using for route? Yeah, we're using integer for route. We're going to need to loop through this array, my route array. So why don't I dim x as an integer? Is there a question here? No? Now, there's a couple of ways that we could tackle this. We could start at the top and keep going down until we find a -1. And then we'll have to say, oh, what was, we're one past where we should have been. Or we can start at the bottom and come up until we find something that's not -1. And then we're right on the one that we want. And the truth is, it's going to be, either way is going to be just as efficient, because at the start, we're going to find it faster starting from the top to go down. At the end, we'll find it faster from the bottom. It's going to equal out either way. So just to get some experience, and I'm indifferent. We can go either way. I wouldn't mind either way. But just to get some experience with working through things backwards, let's go ahead and do this one backwards. So we're going to say 4x equals the upper boundary of route to 0. How do I make it count backwards? Step -1. Oh, in fact, we just do it this way. We're going to simplify this just a bit. Instead of making x, I'm going to use current hotel. So current hotel is going to be, it's going to start off at 35. And we're just going to continue to be counting it down until what? If route sub current hotel is greater than -1, then what do? Just get us out of the loop. Let's think about it in the case of, so current hotel is going to start off at 35. So I'm saying, is route sub 35 greater than -1? No, it is -1. So we're going to go to our next one, which is 34. Is route sub 34? Current hotel is 34. No, we're still in the loop. 33, still in the loop. 2, still in the loop. 1, still in the loop. 0, then our current hotel is going to be 1. Yeah, I think so. That's going to be the number 0 position. So what I really want for current hotel, I want current hotel to be 1, not current position. So my mistake. I think I do want the x. Sorry, going back. We could get by with just one variable. I think it's clearer to do it this way. So at that point, our current hotel is going to equal route sub x. So x is going to use to count down to find out where we are until we find a position in the route array that does not equal -1, or that's larger than -1. And then we're going to remember the index that we saw there. So current hotel will be, in this case, 1. You see how it's happening? Show me how comfortable you are with this loop, 0 to 5. 5, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5. Okay. So once we've gotten through here, we now know that the hotel we are currently at is, see, the hotel number is in current hotel. Okay, so now that we know that hotel 1 is where we are, we can use that piece of information to limit the part of the problem we're working on down to this row of our dist array. Maybe I should call that dist, of our dist array. So now I want to go across and look at all those values. Now, for those of you who have started the homework for tonight, we're about to do something really similar to what the homework is. And that is, we are going to find what the smallest number is in this part of the array. And we're going to return the index that corresponds to it, okay? So I've got my X here again. So let me dim, we're already using X. So 4X equals 0 to upper bound, UBOUND. And I'm going to go ahead and use route here as well. Even though I'm looking at the dist array, but I know it's the same size, right? The route array is a single dimension. It's the same size as both dimensions of my dist array. What if I needed to ask from the dist array? Well, let's go ahead and use the dist array. Dist, if I ask for the upper boundary of dist, what's the problem? There's 2 boundaries. I got to tell which one I need. They're the same. It doesn't matter which one I use. They're the same. And because I'm not quite sure if this is actually a 0 and a 1 or a 1 and a 2 would be appropriate here, I'm just going to use 1. That way I'm safe either way. I'm telling it, so if it's a multi-dimensional array, I have to give the array name and the dimension that I'm after. And let me just go ahead and put a debug.print of X and then dist sub X sub, I'm thinking about it as being a row. So sub current hotel, comma X. And the truth is, the order of these doesn't matter because the same information that's on a row, it's exactly the same information that's on a column. Okay, so we're not solving the problem yet. This is going to return 0. Actually, let's make this as integer. Next hotel is going to return an integer. And now I think I'm ready to run this, and let me put a breakpoint in here. Now, all I'm expecting this to do at this point is I'm expecting it to kind of print off, and I want to see that I've got the expected numbers that I'm dealing with here. So let me go ahead and run this. And let's see. So why are we starting with X equals 0? Because this shouldn't be 1. This should be hotel number. This should be 0. It's a good thing I checked because I had an error. Try it again. X equals, that should be 0. 0 to the upper boundary. What's going on? Oh, I'm not sure why I had an error when I read it, but there we go. All right, let's just see if this looks right. 691.0653. 691.0653. It looked like down here at the very bottom we had 2. We have 2 that were the same number. 841, 841. That's a little bit fishy. Let's just see if that's what those numbers actually are out there. Oh yeah, those really are 2 different 841s right in a row. Salt Lake, I wonder what hotels 34 and 35 are. They're either right next to each other or it's a really strange coincidence. Well, one's in Seattle. I don't know where that one is. I guess it's in Seattle. Okay. So now we've got the loop going across here. So we got to find the smallest out of all this vector of numbers we've got here. We've got to identify the smallest one that we have not yet been to. So how are we going to keep track of which the smallest one is? We've got to keep track of two things. We have to keep track of where we found the smallest number, what position we found it in, and what the smallest number is. We could do that with one variable. I think the problem is slightly easier to understand if we actually hold those in two different variables. So let's do this. Here's our next hotel. Let's declare a couple of variables here. Let me dim. I'll call this one short distance as a single, because that's the type of data we have in our dist array. And let me also have a short index as an integer. Because that is going to be where we found the shortest distance, because ultimately that's what we need to know. We need to know the hotel number that corresponds to the shortest distance. And that's what this function has to return. It's got to tell you that's the next hotel to go to. Okay, and here's a problem. Short distance, and so essentially, we just want to kind of keep looking until we have found the shortest number. But this is going to start off as what? Short distance is going to start off with what value? It's going to start off with 0, which is going to be shorter than any distance I'm going to look for. What I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of keep looking until I find one that's smaller than what the current value is. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself a starting value for this. So let's set short distance equal to some number that's going to be larger than I could possibly expect to find in my table. Any thoughts? I like 24,000 for this. Why 24,000? That's roughly the circumference of the Earth, 24,000 miles. If you've got a distance between two houses, like driving between hotels, it's like drive around the world to get there. That's wrong. Right? There's a shorter way. So under no circumstances do I expect to find a number that's larger than 24,000. Good. So now the very first comparison I make, we're going to pick that up as, that's my best contender that I've seen so far. Good. All right. So let's do this. Thinking now, so the current hotel is the one that we're currently at. So in our situation right now, at this point in the problem, it's going to be Salt Lake City. And then X is going to go through all the rest of my other hotels. So which X's do I not care about? I mean, here's the set of X's that X is in this column right here that's been printed off. Which of all of these do I not care about at this point in the problem? Yeah, this is the one I've already been to. And the reason that I don't care about it is because it's one that I've been to. And so we're going to say, I don't want to look at ones that I've been to before. So I'm going to say if, and what do we have? Whoops. We have been there. If been there, X. I'm going to send X down to my been there function. I'm going to ask, have I been to X? The first time through this loop, X is 0. I'm going to ask, have I been to 0? What's the answer at this point? I have not been to Hotel 0. Right? What's Hotel 0? Hotel 0 is this one here in Los Angeles. I'm starting here. I'm looking through all this, trying to find, is there a 0? And the answer is no. And so been there is false. So when X is 0, that's one I want to consider. So if I've been there, actually, the one I'm interested in is if I've not been there. If not been there. So I'm going to send 0 down there to been there. It's going to come back and say false. You have not, been there 0, false. You haven't been to 0 yet. And so this whole condition now is true. So when been there is false, that's when I want to do something. And that's when I want to compare the ones that I'm interested in. Okay, so now I got to, only inside of this if statement am I saying this is one that matters. So let me just go ahead and run this again now that I have the if statement in there, and I should only see the x's that are possibilities. So I should not see x equals 1 in my list. So 0 this is a possible one. 2 is a possible one, but x equals 1 is not possible because it's one that I've already been to. Okay, so now, right here in this loop, I now have to figure out what logic do I employ here to decide, to figure out the smallest one. I now have the set of relevant numbers. I'm only inside this loop, I'm only dealing with my relevant numbers. What am I going to do to figure it out? How am I going to find the smallest number? Has anyone already solved the homework for tonight? If you have, you kind of have a feeling for this. Anyone want to take a stab at it? That's okay. A little louder. Okay. So by comparing my short distance to these numbers in order, here's the first one I'm looking at. I'm going to say, hey, listen, is this number that I'm looking at right here, is it smaller than the current shortest distance that I've seen? At this point, the first time I hit this 0, the first time I'm looking at this number, what's my current short distance? It's 24,000. Is this one smaller? Yeah, that's the smallest one I've seen so far. So, I'll do this after I print. I'm going to say if, and then this is the number, that's the distance there. If the distance I'm looking at is less than my short distance, I found a new contender. Two things I got to do. In this case, I'm going to record that I have found a new short distance. So short distance. Now what's the shortest distance I've seen? Starts off at 24,000. After I hit 0, what's the shortest distance I've seen? 691. So that one that I observed that was shorter, that's going to become the new shortest distance that I've seen. And I want to remember where I saw it. So my short index is going to equal x. I saw that for number x. Okay, so first time through the loop, my first one that I look at, yep, that's smaller than 24,000. So now I'm remembering that my short index is 0 and my short distance is 691. I get to the end of the loop and I come up here, I'm going through it again. Now I'm going to see 653. And I'm going to say, is 653 smaller than my short distance? What's my short distance at this point? 691. I'll put a little x by my short distance. So is this condition true? 653 less than 691? Yeah, that's true. So I'm going to come in here and make these two changes again. Now my short distance is going to be this one. And my short index is going to be 2. Great, I get down to the loop, I come through again. Now I'm comparing this number to 653. And the statement is 662, current one, less than my current short distance. True or false? That's false, so no change to make. Go through on the next one through, 659. True or false? 659 less than 653. False, nothing to change. Then I get to 650 next time through, 650. And I say 650 less than 653, true or false? True. So I come into that if statement. 650 now becomes the smallest one that the shortest distance. And I'm going to remember short index is at 5. I go through again, 651 or 661 less than 650? No. 425 less than 650? Yes. Same thing happens. I remember that as my short distance, and then I remember my short index is that one right there. Now I'll go through the rest of them. 700, 700, 600, 700. There's not going to be one that's smaller after this. They're all bigger. And so I'll go through the rest of this loop without ever coming back into here. So at the end of this loop, then my short index is holding the index number corresponding to the smallest value. And that's all I have to return. So our function here is called next hotel. So I'm just going to say next hotel equals short index. Right, because setting the name of the function equal to a value is how I say what it returns. That was a lot of work to find out the second hotel. Let me go ahead and run it and let's see what it gives for us. Oops, variable not defined, short index, sort index. Let's call this short index. Let's call this short index. Short index. Okay, so I guess I don't need those numbers there. I should be able to look at route sub 0, and I should see 1 corresponds to Salt Lake City. In fact, and let's go ahead and look at route sub 1. Now, we just did the exercise. Do you remember what the index was that it found for us? I think it was 7. So this should be 7 if that worked right. So we've got a 7 right here. By the way, what could I add onto this line to show the names of the hotels instead of showing the numbers? Right? If this is a 7, what do I do with that to make it show the Las Vegas property, which is property number 7? How would I do it? Let's go back to our initialize arrays. I'm doing something over here in initializing the arrays that's going to allow me to address the names of these hotels. Or we can kind of look at the visual representation of the hotel. So hotel number 7 is Las Vegas. So how would I say, show me the name Las Vegas? This is what my arrays are currently structured at. Route now has a 7 here. Show me on a scale of 0 to 5. 5, I know this, but I'm just shy. 0 is, I'm lost. So we got some 3s, you could probably get there too. All right, so I've got 36 variables holding the names of hotels. What's the name of that array of variables? Right, I've got a hotel array here that's got variable number 1, this one here in Los Angeles, variable 0, this one in Los Angeles, variable number 1, Salt Lake City, variable number 7, Las Vegas. And so all I have to do is give the right index number to the array of hotels and it'll say Las Vegas. So I can say here, hotel sub 7, that's Las Vegas. Well, this is what printed out that 7. So looking at the number 1 slot in my route, I've got the 7. Give that 7 to say I want the 7th hotel, that should show me Las Vegas. So route at this point, thinking of my route in terms of the common names of these hotels, route sub 0, it says start in Salt Lake. Next place to go, route sub 1, is going to be Las Vegas. I'm going to come back up now to my calc route. And what's the next step? Route sub 2. And remember, hotel figures out where we're currently at. So I should just be able to run that same line And that should give me now route sub 2 says from there, go to some place called the Sheridan Suites Fairplex. So do you see the loop I'm going to have to do here? Let's do one more by hand. All right, so little in-class exercise. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this. Finish this problem so that it builds the whole route array just with the numbers, but don't just copy and paste and change the numbers. Give me a loop that's going to handle this and do it right. So take a 3-minute timer. Think 3 minutes is enough? Do you want more? Go ahead and add in that loop. Question?
Start keeping out the bin names. Like whenever I would run this, it would just keep in.
So it's sending you back to Salt Lake each time.
Yeah.
Just take a look at your code. My old man eyes are having a hard time seeing it. Let's see, been there.
Exit function.
Ah, exactly, because now we have the false tail here.
That
Yep,
makes sense.
good.
Now I see what it is.
Did you make it?
I think so. The only thing I was confused about, so I did a 4x equals to something.
Mhm.
Is the number of routes, does that correspond with the hotel count or what?
Yep, because we're going to every hotel.
Okay, then
Yep.
I think I did it right.
Excellent. Okay. Moving to one of the outlet seats. See, I don't think I stopped the recording. Okay. So this should be a pretty straightforward loop, except for the fact that we're going to hard code our first position. So I'm going to dim x as an integer. We're definitely going to start there. I'm going to say for x equals 1. We've already set the value for the number 0 position. So we're going to go from 1 to the upper boundary of hotels or route, because they're both the same size. And so we're going to be looking at first time through, x is going to be 1. We're going to be looking at route sub 1. And we'll say, go calculate the next hotel. Next time through, we're looking at route sub 2. And then all the way through. So we should be able to calculate that. Calc route. Well, it's just called hotel. It's not hotels. Doing a little more printing off than I really want to be doing there, but now I should have a route. Should be able to look at route sub 1 should be 7. Let's go ahead and do these in terms of their property values. So hotel, route sub 1, right? Route sub 0 says start in Salt Lake. 1, go to Las Vegas. 2, Fairplex, wherever that is. 3, Anaheim. So we've gone Salt Lake, picked up Las Vegas on the way. We're down in Anaheim now. What do you think? So far, so good? Another one in Anaheim. That's good. Cerritos. Anyone know where Cerritos is? I think it's somewhere down in the Los Angeles area. Long Beach, definitely Los Angeles area. Los Angeles Airport, I'm pretty sure that's in the Los Angeles area. Okay, so it looks pretty good. So let's do this. Let's, instead of doing these one by one, let's just go ahead and print off our route. So I'm going to go ahead and build this. I could do it in the same loop. Let me go ahead and have a second loop that prints this off. This one I'll want to start back at 0. And let's just print dot print. I'm going to do x plus 1 because I want to see this as kind of like, you know, number 1, number 2. This first stop will start with 1 instead of 0. I'll concatenate on a period and then a space. Then I'll concatenate on hotel sub route sub x. So that should print off the route, the full route that we've calculated. Okay, got my immediate window cleared. I'll run this. Actually, I'm going to take off the debug print down here that was printing off those hotels. Here it is. And I'll stop this and run it again. Okay, let's see if this makes sense. Start in Salt Lake, go to Las Vegas. We got down here to the Los Angeles Airport. So far, Beverly Hills, Los Angeles area. That doesn't look too bad. Downtown hotel. Monarch Beach. You don't know where Monarch Beach is? If only we had some connection to a worldwide network of information. Oh, there it is. Monarch Beach, that's helpful. A little bit lower than Long Beach. So yeah, kind of in here. That looks pretty good. Then La Jolla. I know La Jolla because I was raised in San Diego. So that's down in San Diego. Horton Plaza, San Diego, San Diego. So far, so good. We're coming down past Las Vegas, down to the LA area, now down to San Diego. Palm Springs. I wonder what Palm Springs is. I lost it when I zoomed out. Here it is. Palm Springs. Ugh. What's wrong with Palm Springs? Well, remember, it's in the middle of nowhere. We kind of came down through here on I-15. We came down to Riverside, came into all these in down here. Then we went down to San Diego, and then we're coming back to Palm Springs. Seems like we might have been better off going there first, but not terrible. From there, we go to Bakersfield. Bakersfield is Central California. It's somewhere up in here. Here's Bakersfield. That's looking pretty good. San Jose, Bay Area. So now San Jose is up here. Not bad. I don't know where the Silicon Valley one is, but Silicon Valley is right in the San Jose. San Jose is in the Silicon Valley. So that's good. I don't know where these are. San Francisco, that looks pretty good. Montreal is misnamed. That's really not in Montreal. That's my bad data. San Francisco, San Francisco, San Francisco, San Rafael. Anyone know where San Rafael is? Let's assume it's in the same neighborhood. Pretty good. We're up here to Seattle, Seattle. Resorts and Spa, the Westin Kierland Resorts and Spa. Uh-oh. Scottsdale. Anyone know where Scottsdale is? A little louder. Arizona. Yeah. In fact, we're going Phoenician, which is also in Phoenix area. Phoenix. So we got these four. They're down here in Phoenix. So we started here. We came down, did a bunch of stuff in Southern California. We came up the coast, and where are we ending up? All the way to Phoenix. Oh. What would have been better? Come down to Las Vegas, then go to Phoenix. You can drive, you can't see them on this map, but there's pretty decent roads to drive to Phoenix. Then come down to San Diego, then come up to Palm Springs, Los Angeles, central area, up and then down. So, darn it, could have done better with a pencil. Really. But our whole point here was two things about what we're trying to accomplish. One, it happens that we could do this with a pencil, but can FedEx do it with a pencil? No, FedEx got to figure out an algorithm to be able to do this because they got too many to do by hand. And our whole purpose really here was to get some exposure dealing with lots and lots of variables that we organize in arrays of variables. Okay, so that's the solution. Yeah. Do I want to know how FedEx does it? Are you telling me, or are you asking me if I know? I have no idea. Yeah, how do they do it?
What they'll do is they'll take a and they'll let you just that. Just think because
Sure. Yeah, you don't have to throw everything into the mix because you're pretty sure the stuff in Seattle is not going to take you to Phoenix first. Right. Yeah, and you can do it with brute force up to about 25 locations. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, folks, we're done a little bit early today, but if you have questions or your code's not quite working, hang around and I'll give you a hand. Otherwise, thanks for coming and we'll see you tomorrow. Like the only time out of the year I get to say that. We'll see you tomorrow. Class dismissed.